welcome, welcome, folks. Thank you for being here for our home electrification Ask Me Anything session. We appreciate you joining the call. And we're at the top of the hour, so we are going to get started. And all right, I'll introduce our speakers here tonight. So we have a wonderful panel of 4 CCL folks who have taken steps toward the electrification upgrades, and they're going to share their journey. So we have Susan Secord from Colorado, Pete Marsh from California, Alan Hibner from New York, and Karen Uhlenhut from Missouri. So thank you guys for being our panelists tonight. We are excited to hear from you in just a few minutes. And our learning goals for tonight, just so we're on the same page about what we're going to achieve here in this hour together, we really want to highlight the wisdom, stories, and experiences of these CCL leaders who have electrified their home appliances. So we're going to learn from the folks who have done it. And then we want to give you on the call who are interested in this, in these types of upgrades, we want to give you the chance to ask your questions. And then at the end, we will invite you all to take the next step in pursuing your own home electrification plans. All right, so without further ado, we will get started with our panel. So we're first going to do just a round of introductions so that we can meet our panelists and we can learn what upgrades they've done and what incentives they took advantage of, just so you guys on the call have a little bit of context about what they can speak to. Okay, so I'll call on Susan first. Susan, you want to tell us what electrification upgrades you've made and what incentives you took advantage of?
Sure. So just a little background. I live in Boulder, Colorado. We have a 1,600 square foot bi-level home that was built in the 1960s. It was part of the big city expansion. We actually started our process 33 years ago when we moved into our home, and we did an energy audit, which is really critical before you add any electrification. So based on that, we added insulation, we replaced windows, we replaced light bulbs, etc. And then 12 years ago, we added solar to the roof, and that covered all of our electric needs. And the extra went back into the grid. And then in 2015, we bought a Leaf, and we took advantage of $7,500 federal tax credit at that point, $5,000 Colorado tax credit, and $8,000 from the city of Boulder. It was, I think the car cost us $14,000 when we got through with all that. I don't think that's available now. So last year we bought an induction stove. It was an upgrade from an electric stove, so there were no rebates for that. But this year we decided to replace everything else. We replaced our gas hot water heater. We had hoped to do it with an air source heat pump. That did not work out, and I'll explain more about that later. But so we didn't get any rebates for that because it has to be an air source heat pump, hot water heater to get a rebate. But we did go ahead and replaced our gas boiler and we've been using a swamp cooler actually for AC for years. And we now have mini splits in our house, air source. It's an air source heat pump, but it's a mini split system. And we've got 5 mini splits, and we've benefited from rebates from our county for about $1,200, from the state of Colorado for $500. Our utility kicked in $2,000, and we will get the $2,000 federal tax credit when we file our taxes next year. We couldn't benefit from the potential $8,000 federal rebate because the state of Colorado, and I think no states have really figured out the full guidelines on that. So that's basically a summary of what we've done.
Wow, incredible. Okay, just a couple things, just a few rebates. That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so thank you for that introduction. Let's go to Pete next. Pete, what have you guys electrified and what incentives have you been able to take advantage of?
Hi, everybody. Pete Marsh, Southern California, so a very mild climate, Mediterranean. Uh, we've got a 1,600 square foot 1920s house. It just went over 100 years old. What that means when the realtor says it's cute and charming, that means it's leaky as heck and that kind of thing. Um, we We've done what I describe as 10 out of 11 electrification projects. And that sounds like a lot, but a few of them are things that we don't think about as often. Um, we started the first two things, we've been in this house just over 4 years, beginning the pandemic. We started with laundry and EV charging because we already had an electric vehicle and you need laundry. We already had an electric dryer, but the house was set up for a gas dryer, so we had to put in a 240-volt electrical outlet. Um, so we added EV charging. The next thing we did was an energy model. And so just like Susan, I can't recommend that enough. We spent $800 on our energy model. I don't remember if rebates or credits are available for that now, but this and a couple of our projects just preceded the Inflation Reduction Act. So we missed out by a few months on some of the tax credits. Um, so uh, in short, well, I'll talk about the energy model later, probably during Q&A, but get it done. Uh, because of that, we did insulation, but only in our attic, not in our walls, which were also insulated, and not in the crawl space. But that helped enough to bring down the size of heat pump we were going to need from 5 tons to 3 tons. So that was a real cost-effective approach to doing the heating. We did a ducted heat pump almost 3 years ago, and we wound up as part of that. We did upgrade our main electrical panel. One of the things you'll hear us on the electrification action team emphasize is it's going to be far more common that you will not need to upgrade your electrical panel. Until a couple of years ago, we thought that was going to be required for a lot of homes, but there are approaches called a watt diet and new appliances that are even more efficient and lower power that let you get away with not upgrading electrical panel in many cases. We decided to do ours because I think it was older than the house and it was rustier than my old car. So we went ahead and replaced it more from a safety concern than from electrical capacity requirement. Um, and then we installed solar and battery. We cooked for 2 years on a portable induction hob sitting on top of our gas range. But last month we gave ourselves an anniversary present of a slide-in induction range. So we're set up with that now. For the induction cooking, even though the IRA is now in place, it only provides benefits for rebates when those come out through the various states for the median income below 150% of regional area. And we didn't qualify for that, so we got no rebate for our cooking, unfortunately. So our last item left is water heating.
Incredible. All right, so you guys have been busy too. This is very impressive. um, all right, so next we'll go to Alan. Alan, what have you guys electrified and what incentives have you been able to take advantage of?
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to share a screen here and I'm also going to make this. Can you folks see the little list here?
Yep.
Okay, so my name's Al Hibner. I live in Penfield, New York, at the Rochester CCL chapter. Been a member since 2017. And we have a raised ranch. It has 2 levels. It's an integral garage, so it's built into the side of a hill. So there's about 2,200 square feet of conditioned space, heated and cooled space in the house. And I entitled this, and there'll be a copy of this posted later. I'll make a copy available. I'm not going to cover every point here because it's a lot. A lot of us are early adopters, and everything I've done except for one upgrade is pre-IRA. Okay, early adopters. So I call it 4 heat pumps and a promise. The first heat pump came, it's behind me on the wall here, a mini split in 2020 to replace a 32-year-old gas furnace. No IRA, only got $300 tax credit. Okay. Um, Charging, put in level 2 charging, $295 alternative fuel vehicle tax credit. 2020, 4 years ago, also bought a Chevy Bolt. At that point, there were really good discounts, although not as good as Susan. I'm jealous with your EV discounts, insanely good. Okay. But New York State had a drive clean $2,000 EV rebate, which it still does. And there was an $8,500 discount. But really the big one that I want to feature is geothermal system. In 2021, exactly 3 years ago, not pretty close to 3 years ago, we put in a water furnace 7 series geothermal system with a heat pump, hot water heater, and what's called a de-superheater, which is a secondary circuit that grabs waste heat from the compressor of the geothermal furnace. And that system was $43,900, and the incentives were $16,700. Had I waited a couple of years, it would have been a 30% rebate tax credit versus 26. And New York State has now added an additional $5,000 of a tax credit. So gosh, I could have gotten my geothermal system for close to $20,000 net at that point. But that's okay because it's awesome. Geothermal is absolutely amazing. So it was 26% non-business energy credit, and then New York State has a clean heat rebate that goes directly to the vendors. So a lot of basically non-rebate kind of purchases I've made. And I want to, one I really enjoy is a Whirlpool heat pump dryer. That is our 4th heat pump. So we now have replaced all of our gas appliances with heat pumps, and really loving being 100% all electric in our house. We have shade on our roof, so we can't really get solar panels, but thinking about some way to do that, maybe with a ground mount. And last year, and this is a comment I'm going to make for people, is just like Peter said, get that survey done first, not later. Okay. Get your whole house air sealing and insulation and your blower door test and all of that done first, and then you can properly size your appliances. So, but I had additional insulation and air sealing work done back in 2022. So the only thing that qualified under the IRA was when I decided to come off lease and purchase that Bolt. I got the used EV tax credit of $4,000. And that's my story.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you, Alan. And last but not least, Karen, what have you electrified and what incentives have you been able to take advantage of?
Well, Alan, I just want to say that that's just an amazing story. I started doing this as a result of, well, as part of adding on to my house. We live in a bungalow that was 1,000 square feet, my 2 daughters and I, and it was starting to feel way too small. So I decided to put a partial second floor on, and the contractor said, well, you know, the right way to heat and cool your second floor is a heat pump. So I said, okay, I've heard that I should be heading that direction. So because we live in a place that gets cold in the winter and hot in the summer, he said I would also need a backup electric furnace. So anyway, I had a heat pump and an electric furnace installed then, and that seemed to work pretty well. And I don't know exactly when, but I would say within a couple of years, either my AC or my furnace was going out. And so I thought, well, I guess I should get a second heat pump and a second electric furnace. So that's what I did. And I got rid of the air conditioner and the gas furnace. And I thought, oh, yeah. And then also, as part of my expansion, I really needed to get rid of the chimney, which ran up through the middle of the house. And it was, I could have a little more kitchen counter space if I got rid of the chimney. And of course, if I get rid of the chimney, which was the way the gas water heater and furnace were vented, I could get an electric water heater. So I decided it was time to do that. And the only gas machine I still had was my stove. And one day, I think I was baking some bread, and I put a glass pan of water not on one of the shelves, but on the floor of the oven. And then I opened it, and the glass was all shattered all over the floor. And although the stove worked, the oven didn't work. And I thought, good, it's time for my induction stove. So I got that a couple years ago. And then I also disconnected from the gas company, which was really fun. And where I live, I have to pay $20 a month just to be connected. So I was loving not paying $20 a month for essentially nothing anymore. So that's been a couple years ago. So I think it has worked fantastically well. I also live in a house that's now. I also live in a house that's about 1,500 square feet, and my monthly energy bill is $100, which I think is fantastic. So I think it's been a really a series of good moves, and they kind of came along for various reasons, but I don't know that I'm going to have solar panels because I have a lot of trees, and I'd have to cut down a bunch of them, and that wouldn't seem like a very good idea. And I drive a Prius, and I don't really think I'm going to get an EV anytime real soon. So anyway, I think where things are now is working extremely well.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, thank you all for those that lay of the land of what you've all done. And so now I think let's turn. We have a few questions in the Q&A, so we'll go ahead and turn to people's questions. So first, I'm going to take this question from Dana. He's asking, what did you learn from your home energy audits? So I think two of you mentioned that as a starting place. That's a good kind of first step to figure out what might make sense for your home, what the opportunities are. But so what did you specifically learn from those audits? And yeah, Alan, you want to start?
Yeah, having the blower door test done where they pressurize your home to see how leaky it is. This is a 1955 raised ranch, so it's typical post World War II baby boom construction. And initially, before any work was done, the air changes this was really interesting to me. The air changes per hour, the amount of air coming in that replaces the volume of your home, air changes per hour was nine air changes per hour. After the work was done, it went down to 5. So it was a 42% reduction. So that was fascinating to learn. And that's something that you will learn when you have an energy audit done, assuming you get a blower door test. So recommend that highly.
Okay, thank you. And Pete, you want to talk about
Yeah, and I was one of the others. I'll share my screen, and there we should see my it's a text dense summary of the energy model that we had done. The energy modeler normally provides only one or two options for his or her recommendations for your home. But in our case, we were having really interesting discussions. He kind of liked having another geek to talk to about this, and so he presented me first with 6 options and then 3 more. And we wound up choosing option number 9, which was, as I mentioned briefly earlier, we insulated fairly heavily in the attic, but not in the walls or under the floor. Blowing insulation into the walls would have been feasible, but you have to drill a hole in every single stud cavity and above and below fire blocks if you have them. And so there's a lot of work to doing that. insulating under the floor we could have done, but there was a lot of piping and wiring in our place, and we've lived in a bunch of different houses and always found that insulation winds up hanging down from the floor, and if it's not in contact, it's not doing its job. So we decided that was likely to be less effective. But as I mentioned, this reduced the size of heat pump required from 5 tons or 60,000 BTUs down to 3 tons. And just a quick picture, couple of pictures here. This is blowing the insulation into the attic. One nice thing is we have a steep roof, so lots of room to work in there. And you notice the insulation is being mounted over the top of the ducts there, so that adds to the heat retention from the ducts. This is the before picture, or the 2 top pictures are, the ducts were in decent shape. We wound up replacing them because they had some crud in them, and that was only about $2,200 extra for our 1,600 square foot home with 9 registers. So we decided to go ahead and spend the money on new ducts. And over here, you see what was just an old storage room is now the she shed. This is the playroom for our granddaughters. So that was a co-benefit of the insulation project.
Fabulous. Okay. We have a question about from Ashraf is asking, how much have you saved after electrifying your home? So I know you guys have all touched on the incentives that you received, but maybe I wonder if anybody could speak to, have you noticed bills going down, energy bills going down as you have made these updates to efficiency? Anything you can speak to on sort of ongoing costs?
I can speak to that if you'd like. So we just finished getting everything installed in April. So we have a new system, but I've been tracking our energy use this year versus last year. And overall, on a monthly average, our overall energy use is 30% less. So that's, to me, that's really significant. Now, I'm not looking at the dollars because the cost of gas fluctuates, and so that's passed through to the homeowners. So I'm mainly just looking at, how my energy use went down. And to do that, I had to learn how to convert from therms to kilowatt hours. And so I've got this little spreadsheet, and I'm keeping track month by month what the kilowatt hour equivalent was last year versus the kilowatt hours because it's only kilowatt hours now because my gas bill is 0. So, but 30%, that's good. But, we're not in the winter yet. So we'll see how that goes.
Sure. I love that, like the therms to kilowatt hours. I think if you weren't already a CCL nerd, the electrification stuff is going to get you the rest of the way there. You gotta brush up on all this stuff. Okay, well, that is you mentioning the winter, that's a good segue into, we have a question from Ellie asking, she says, I live in a place where the electricity goes out several times a year, often for several days at a time, and it does get cold. Any thoughts about how to deal with those days?
One of the dilemmas that I faced was just that very question. In New York State, we do have cold winters, and we're aging in place, we're retired. We do not want to suffer during those periods when we have power outages. So unlike Susan, we did not get rid of our natural gas. We actually ended up putting in a backup gas generator. Had I been able to do solar, I probably would have looked at solar and battery backup for the ability to back up the house. But, we just bite the bullet and go with a gas generator for the period of hours that we're going to have outages and power outages. I don't know if that answered the question that the user had there.
Yeah, I think so. That, depending on what's possible in your area or how cold it gets, then you may need some backups. But yeah, if solar and battery storage is an option, then you're not you're not reliant on the overall grid. If there's an outage, you still have what you need at home if you have that set up for yourself.
So if I could just add on here, let's see. For those of us who have solar panels, without a battery backup, all of that energy goes into the grid. And so we really draw our energy from the grid. And so when the electricity goes out, even with a gas burner, you're out of luck, because you need, at least for us, because we had forced hot water, you need electricity to pump that through your house. So when we didn't have electricity, we're cold. So we're really in the same situation in either system, that when the electricity goes down, we'll be cold. But fortunately, that doesn't happen here very, very often. So.
Yeah, Pete.
Yeah, and two quick notes. With solar and a battery like I have, we could go indefinitely, many, many, many days, because the solar would charge the battery every day, and we could use it every night. We'd have to be on a slight watt diet, but not too bad in our case. In very cold or very hot climates, you'd be on a more significant watt diet. Another approach that some people take to back up heat is wood stove. One of our people that we'll have on the Ask Sean show 10 days, 11 days from now is in Vermont, and he has a wood stove that's been in the house for decades. And he's just kept that and using that on days when it gets colder than his heat pump can handle, and that kind of thing.
Awesome. All right. We have a question from Becky in the chat asking, how does the immediate discount work? So say you go to Home Depot to buy, an induction stove. How would you get that first discount? Maybe
nobody else is jumping up, so I'll take that one. The short answer is that the upfront discounts are rebates. They're available to people below 150% of the area median income in your area, state or county. And those point of sale rebates are going to be available only when each state individually implements the Inflation Reduction Act. So far, only New York has done that. There are 6 or 7 other states their programs are approved but not quite implemented. And there's another 10 who have submitted their programs. But that means that only about a third of the states, representing maybe half of the US population, even have states that have submitted for these programs. That's one of the most disappointing things to me so far about the Inflation Reduction Act, is that slow rollout of those rebates. So many other fantastic things, but I wish we could have gotten that done faster.
Yeah, makes sense. So the tax credits are available now, but the upfront rebates are limited based on the state rollouts.
And Becky asked a follow-on question saying, so the discount isn't before you leave the store. It is supposed to be. When they are implemented, they are supposed to be point of sale rebates.
Yeah, so that's what we're heading toward. Okay, I have a question from Nadine asking about the heat pump clothes dryer. So Alan, you mentioned you have a heat pump dryer for clothes. She says, from what I've seen so far, the capacity of the heat pump dryer seems very small, and drying time is longer than a regular gas or electric dryer. So what's been your experience, and what do you like about your?
You would have to pry my heat pump dryer from my cold, dead hands. I do most of the laundry in our home, and the capacity is the same size as the one I bought, and I can provide that. By the way, I have a blog on my website. I'll post that to Flannery for posting later. I also have a blog with the entire story of my electrification, and it's the heat pump dryer. Yes, slightly longer, not bad. A little bit longer. Typical load for us is about an hour. towels might be more like an hour and a half to 2 hours, but who cares? I'm down here watching it, it's not a problem. The heat pump dryer is awesome. It's been running 2.5 years now for us flawlessly, and I could not recommend it more. If you want to know what brand, download all of the stuff that I will have Flannery post.
Yes, we will put your resources in the community forums, the electrification forum, so that folks can follow up on this. Okay, we have another question from Ellie saying, we got a heat pump water heater when our old water heater died, and had some problems with the heater and the installation. Any pointers on how to find installers that really have experience with heat pumps? So yeah, maybe if folks could talk about how you found your contractors or made sure you were working with someone who really had the chops to make these upgrades.
I'll jump on that one also. In California, there's a nonprofit named Building Decarb Coalition that has a program called the Switches On. They have a pretty good contractor finder. A few other states have similar things, but I don't have the website names. Most significantly, check with your utility company or with any kind of an energy advisory nonprofit in your state or region. And I've got a slide that summarizes a few of these, so I'll drop a link to that in the chat. But in worst case, you just have to do an internet search for, HVAC contractors in my area and try to use the word heat pump in there and see what you can find. It's a challenge. And then quality of work can be a challenge too. Go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, we're lucky in New York State. New York State has an agency called NYSERDA. It has stood up 12 regional energy hubs. And we have a nonprofit in the Rochester. So this is our situation. We have a nonprofit in Rochester that actually vets vendors and makes recommendations. I actually work with them in providing educational programs for residents and people all around our area. But we actually have a approved list of really green, sustainable vendors that can be selected from, all of which I used. I used most of the vendors. So we're lucky in New York. If you live in New York, you might have that capability.
All right, we have another question from Dana asking, which of your electrification or efficiency upgrades has been your favorite? So we can hear from everybody on this one.
Well, I'll start first. Geothermal. Oh my goodness gracious. Geothermal. I mean, it is just out of this world. It's a coefficient of performance of approximately 5. So every kilowatt of energy in yields 5 kilowatt hours of heating and cooling. Nice. And the air comes out in the summer right now at 85, 90 degrees. The air coming out of the vents is about 50 degrees. It doesn't take very long to cool down your house. Geothermal, the idea that there's no equipment outside is not going to get beaten up by the snow and the cold and the wind and the rain. And geothermal is just to die for, personally. My favorite.
Awesome. All right. Pete, Susan, or Karen, you want to speak to your favorite upgrade?
Well, I would say so. We have air source heat pumps. We looked into geothermal, and it was just super expensive, and it would have torn up our whole landscape to get it put in. So we went with air source heat pumps, and just so people know, the kind of heat pumps you get for air source, it depends on if you have forced hot air. That's one system that you get, but we don't have forced hot air. We have forced hot water. We have baseboard hot water heaters. So we had to get mini splits. But we've really enjoyed them. We have 5 around the house. They're super quiet, as opposed to our swamp cooler, which was pretty noisy. It really worked well, but it was quite noisy. And so we've enjoyed that. It puts out They're quiet. It's easy to regulate. So I guess that would be my favorite one.
Well, I don't have a lot to choose from. I mean, I've got 2 heat pumps and I've got 1 induction stove, and I've got, yeah, that's really what I have. I mean, I got an electric water heater, but that wasn't any real cutting edge technology. Um, I guess I would say I have somewhat mixed feelings about my induction stove. There's some pros and cons to that, but um, the heat pumps I think have certainly been wonderful. I mean, I wasn't sure if they were going to heat the house very effectively in the winter, and really they take care of it probably 95% of the time. But there are occasions when I really need another source of heat here. So I do have my electric furnace to take care of that.
Gotcha. All right. And
Okay.
Pete?
And so I guess probably my favorite is the induction stove, simply because it's something that you interact with every single day. Whereas, the heat pump and the other stuff, I guess our clothes dryers we interact with frequently also. But I think the induction stove, we had a challenge of, we had a 36-inch gas range and a 36-inch spot in our countertop to fill in. And it turns out that the selection in 36-inch ranges is for induction is far less than for 30-inch ranges, which are much more common. And we had to spend more money. We like it overall pretty well. We loved the design of some of the 30-inch models better. And there's one downside that's a known downside of some induction cooking is it makes a noise that's a little bit of a pain in the neck. It's when you turn the magnets up to medium high or high, we get a little bit of a buzzing noise. And so check that out if you can at an appliance store beforehand, and literally have the salespeople put, as you're finalizing your decision, make that audibility test one of your final tests, or read reviews. There are some reports on that in reviews. So I'll jump in briefly on the heat pump question, also the air source versus ground source. And Alan, I'm thrilled that you're having such a good experience. What I have read in the last couple of years is that in general, because air source heat pumps are getting so efficient and working down to colder and colder temperatures, they're at 10 below 0 Fahrenheit right now and getting better. In general, in most cases, the extra cost of a ground source heat pump is probably not going to be cost effective. It doesn't mean they're not technically great, but you may not need to spend that money.
Got it. Okay. So we have a question from Christian, which came in before, Alan, you said that the geothermal was your favorite stuff. He's asking about the geothermal HVAC and wondering like what it looks like, installation costs, how do we know if it's available in our state? So I wonder if maybe you want to zoom out a little bit. So we know it's your favorite, but can you talk a little more for those of us who aren't familiar with that setup? Like, what does it look like to have that installed?
Yeah, I don't know about your state, but in my blog called All Electric Life, I've written multiple articles, and I actually document the entire process, actually from the point of comparing it to a hybrid system with just a heat pump and a gas furnace, and then I ultimately selected geothermal, and from the very first minute of drilling, I have videos that you can watch on the drilling process, waging trench welfare. We did not tear up the yard as much, Susan, that because we had vertical wells drilled, and then here's the trenching to bring it into the house. So all of that, every single bit of the process of installing geothermal is documented here in my blog, and I would love to have you come back and take a look at it. So, and also including a really high-tech additional component that I added called a desuperheater. It's a secondary circuit to capture waste heat from the geothermal compressor. And the water furnace runs at 12 different compressor and fan speeds, so it's extraordinarily efficient. So I'll drop the link for this blog in the chat. But there's videos there to show the installation. The cost that I quoted you, $43,900, included installation and drilling and all of the hardware. And I got it down to a net of 27. And right now, with all of the other incentives, it'd be closer to 20,000. And if you look at that versus a mini split system, you know, the net difference, you know, it's going to take more years to certainly to return that investment. But the comfort level, I now heat and cool my entire house, 2,200 square feet, for $53 a month. This is heating and cooling 2,200 square feet in a winter climate for $53 a month. And that's documented at my rate of 1.48 cents per kilowatt, 14.8 cents per kilowatt hour over the last 3 years. So that's what I pay, is less than about $600 a year to heat and cool a house in a northeastern climate. Not too bad. Now, will I get a return on investment, Peter? No, I'm 74 years old. I'm not going to get an ROI. But you know, I don't really care at this point. The comfort is extraordinary. My wife wears a sweater in the house right now. Anyway, so I'll drop that link in the chat. Thank you. Thank you for the question.
Awesome. And we have one follow-up. Justin is asking, can anyone get a geothermal system installed, or are there?
Yes, of course. Absolutely. Well, it's best if you have a air duct system versus a boiler and, you know, baseboard heat. If you have central air duct, you know, heating duct work, that works so much better with a geothermal. So if you have a boiler and baseboard, it's going to be a lot tougher. Otherwise, with duct work, have at it.
Love it. Okay, we have 2 questions here about electrified options that nobody has mentioned, but I'll just check. Can anybody speak to electric fireplaces or electric grills? And if not, that's okay, but just wanted to toss that out there. No, seeing shaking heads. Okay, Justin,
a friend of mine last night just told me about his electric grill that he has outside of his house, and he absolutely loves it. So he uninstalled his gas grill, and now he's an electric grill.
Nice. Okay, so the changes are happening, even though we don't have any of those folks on the panel tonight.
Yeah.
Okay, so Ken is. Oh, Alan. Yep.
Well, I wanted to say, I have an electric device that I installed for $350, 500 installed, called a sense meter. You put that in your electrical panel, and it actually monitors, it locates and tracks every single appliance you put in on that you turn on. So something I could recommend for people, because that allows you to look at what your usage is and then be able to control phantom loads and electricity you're losing through various sources in your house. So strong recommendation, low price, high return on investment. It's called a Sense, S-E-N-S-E meter. It goes right in your panel and allows you to monitor everything that you turn on in your house. Pretty cool stuff.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a good tip. Okay, we have a question from Ken asking, any recommendations on the best brands of air source cold climate heat pumps? He's heard that Mitsubishi seems to have the best reputation among reviewers and commenters, but he's asking, are there any trustworthy review sources? So if folks can speak specifically to heat pumps, that'd be great, but also just in general, if you can speak to, like, how did you choose what particular brands to go with, or particular appliances to upgrade to when you were making these changes?
Okay. So I had a preference for Mitsubishi, which somebody else just mentioned, that is one of the best reputations in the business. And but the choice of equipment manufacturer is going to be driven to a high degree by your choice of contractor. And so you can choose one or the other, but many contractors choose to only install equipment from one or two or a small number of manufacturers, not because of evil kickbacks or anything, but because there's very specific detailed differences in each one, and they have there's already a challenge keeping crews trained and effective, and so limiting the number of different manufacturers that you deal with limits your training challenge from the contractor's perspective. Another thing that's less recognized is that the choice of manufacturer also helps determine your interface to knowing some of your energy usage. The heat pumps do give you some option to look up online, although that's more common in solar. So anyway, we wound up with a Daikin, which is regarded as a middle of the pack, good, solid, but it's not Mitsubishi.
So I could speak to a little bit. So we had done research and had decided, since we're in Colorado, we get to temperatures, they can get to 10 below. And so we wanted something for a cold climate, and Mitsubishi does have a really good reputation. I also wanted to say, if you get involved with this, it's really important to get multiple bids, because even though and even if you choose different vendors who use Mitsubishi, it was really fascinating to us to see how different providers would design a system, what they would recommend in terms of number of mini splits, even the sizing of the system. So I just wanted to throw that in, that just like any major purchase, you really need to get multiple bids. And we saw a big variation amongst the people we got bids from.
Yeah, great point. And it looks like, Pete, I see you dropping resources in the chat, so thank you. Thank you for providing those as well. Okay, so we're coming up, we've got a few minutes left. So I want to ask, I'm just going to take host privileges and ask all my own questions here. I can imagine that if this were not my job to start to know things about all of this, I might feel a little overwhelmed by all the choices and all the information. And so my question for you guys is, how much did you know about this stuff when you started? Or and how did you kind of learn it as you went through it? Like, did you just research on your own? Are there resources that you like read or watched, or sort of how did you get to this level of knowledge about electrification and all these different home upgrades, from just being like a regular person to now a panelist at something like this, who has having so much expertise to share? Or maybe you did know it all beforehand. Maybe I just don't know anything. Yeah, Alan.
Well, a lot of what I did started with a desire to help our residents in our community actually get a higher percentage of renewable electricity as opposed to gas created electricity. And so we lobbied the town in the manner of CCL's lobbying for carbon pricing. We lobbied our town to put that together, and along the way, I picked up an immense amount of information and research and learning about the electrical appliances. And we have a very robust group of people. Many are CCL volunteers as well, who work in our community on teaching people about going green and electrifying and things like that. So we just have a wonderful support group of people that bounce the ideas off and talk about vendors. And again, I talked about the community group that we have, which is actually funded by NYSERDA, a New York entity that actually has a job to provide this information out. So, lots of sources.
That's great.
I would say we started the process several years ago because we were really interested in making this conversion well before the IRA, well before that. And I think our original research, in addition to online, was just finding early adopters. For example, we knew of a guy in town who lost his house in a fire up in the hills and bought a little house in town, and he decided to make it all electric. And so he did that, 7 or 8 years ago. So we went over to his house and talked to David and learned from him. And then living in Boulder, there are a lot of people who think about this. And so there are people who, do webinars on what they've done in their own homes. So I think the best thing is just finding people who've done it and learning from them. We also in Colorado have a nonprofit called Go Electric Colorado. Some of the folks from it are on the electrification team. And so they're a nonprofit. So they're a really great source of information. So it sounds like other parts of the country have those kinds of nonprofits that are specifically set up to answer questions. So I think those are the big ways that we've made our way. And I feel like after the fact, I was saying to somebody last night, it now seems so simple now.
Yeah.
We're electrified. It seems really simple, but starting off, it seemed really confusing. So anyway.
From 4 years ago, I've used all of the resources. I found Rewiring America and fell in love. And Rewiring America's resources are outstanding. The calculator, the project planner, Flannery, use it, go jump on it. I mean, it is just incredible. And then they have produced documents, PDFs that you can download that are just outstanding on how to electrify. So that's where I'd go immediately and I tout that in every class I give is Rewiring America has everything you need to get started.
Fabulous. Yeah, that's a great reminder. That's their whole gig. Pete, yeah.
Yeah, so 2 things. Following up on that, agree that Rewiring is a great source. Another great source, Nate Adams, who wrote, he calls himself the House Whisperer, and he wrote a book, the Home Comfort Book 101, and he's got a Facebook group on Electrify Everything, another great source. He's a hands-on contractor, giving advice from boots on the ground as well. I saw another question in the chat that I wanted to respond to before we run out of time. I'll be quick, but Ellie asked, she says that some expert sources in Washington state are expressing concern about brownouts in the next few years because of the increasing load on the grid from people electrifying, plus data centers, artificial intelligence, et cetera. I would like to kind of officially poo-poo that concern. It's a valid concern, but a lot of those whispers emanate from the entrenched industry that is threatened as we electrify, the fossil fuel industry. And if you step back and look, we are realizing, and studies have confirmed in the last half decade, there have been dozens of studies, it's possible to electrify 80 to 85% of the US economy and do it completely from zero carbon sources, wind and solar, over the next 2 to 3 decades. As we do that, the size of the US electric grid will grow by 2.5 to 3 times. We'll go from 4,000 terawatt hours per year to 10 or 12,000 terawatt hours per year. So everybody is fully, a lot of the people working on making the energy transition happen are well aware that, yeah, gee, we're going to use a lot more electricity. We're going to need to generate more and distribute it. And that means the grid. but we've been investing in the grid for decades. In the 1950s, in one decade, we doubled the size of the grid, and we did it again in the 1960s. So the challenge before us now is to merely triple it in 20 or 30 years. Are we that much stupider than we were before I was born that we can't do it anymore? No. So there are doubters and naysayers out there. And because we have this wonderful anarchic, chaotic planning system in this country, there are going to be goofs, and we're going to stub our toes, and there will be a few brownouts. But California had some very widely publicized a couple of years ago. Texas had wintertime outages, mostly due to thermal plants, gas and coal. We are going to have those, but California, our solar and wind generation, and especially batteries, are up so much that the risk of brownouts is substantially lower over the next couple of years than it has been in the past. So we can get there.
Well said. All right. Well, now we are almost at the end of our time together, so I'm going to wrap things up with just a couple of slides, but thank you to our wonderful panelists. You've given us so much to think about, so much insight into these projects. It's wonderful to hear your experiences and hear your endorsements of different things. Alan, yep.
One very quick word of wisdom. I have spent as much time making sure that the power supply for our electricity is clean, because our native utility right now is 60% natural gas produced electricity. Join a community solar program or work with your community to set up community choice aggregation so that you're buying renewable electricity to power all of your electrical appliances. Why would you get the electrical appliances and then use electricity that burns coal to generate it? So do whatever you can to make sure your electricity supply is clean. Thank you.
Sure, fair point. That I'll give a little plug for the for clean energy permitting reform that CCL also works on, because this is part of what's needed, right? Is so that we can build and connect so much more clean energy to the grid. Yes. So the group you should find is your local CCL chapter. I'm glad everyone's plugged in. Okay, so just real quick to wrap up, resources for you if you want to go further with electrification, your own journey, and also outreach about this. So we, of course, have our Electrification Month campaign going on right now. We have our landing page where we're logging conversations. And on that page, you can find links to our electrification action team, where you can hear a lot more from Pete Marsh and his buddies over there. They have lots of good resources to share. You can also find more about home electrification, the rebates and everything from the IRA, and a link to Rewiring America's savings calculator for electrification. So lots of resources out there. But thank you everyone for being with us tonight. Again, we really appreciate all of the time and insights from our 4 panelists. So thank you, Pete, Alan, Susan, and Karen. We appreciate it. And thank you all for being here. Have a great rest of your night.
Thanks, Flannery.
Thanks. Take care, everyone.
Thank you so much. This was great.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Citizens Climate Lobby's training program. You can tune into more episodes anywhere podcasts are available. Inspired by what you heard today? Join Citizens Climate Lobby to advocate for bipartisan climate solutions. Go to community.citizensclimate.org to find more trainings, resources, your local chapter, national action teams, discussion forums, and more. Be sure to like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and Instagram @CitizensClimate. We also invite all of our listeners to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiration.
Like what you hear? Recommend us to your friends and make sure to give us a 5-star rating. It helps us show up on other listeners' feeds. Feel free to pass on any suggestions for future episodes in the comments as well.
And together, we are creating the political will for a livable world.